sense that need or that desire,
the willingness,
the way,
the openness to it.
Yeah, exactly. I tell people, I go, if you come down to these sightings, and then not all the time. I've had assholes come down, and I've just, like, these people came down in worse conditions, and they're laughing at me and stuff because I didn't really think or want to do a sighting that particular night. And these two guys come down, and they're balloons. I'll bet they're not ready for you tonight. They can't see you from this side, right? All this shit. I was like, You got a flashlight? You got a cell phone? I used their cell phone and their flashlight, signaled for about 5 minutes, and then got a triangle to punch right out from the fog, right over the water.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and it was reflecting on the bay. So
that
and
also
they're like, okay, let's take a picture with you. And I'm like, no, let's watch these things that are really there.
Do you think it depends on your mood? Do you feel like the UFOs are empathic towards you?
Yeah, because I'm ornery. And some people, that have gone on sightings with me and stuff don't like the ornery part of me because I don't like. I think you can disrespect them, and when people put that vibration out there and disrespect them like that, I just kind of, it's like I'll turn around and go, look, you can go if you want, Because I'm here to communicate with these things and not be judgmental. I'm trying to find out and not refuse to accept.
If you're messing up your vibe, what's the point of them even coming there? You got to get in that sort of thing.
Yeah, you have to be open to it probably to even experience
they have to be saying there's some level of respect that we're going to afford to this little motherfucker here.
That's right.
So it's right. It's I tell people all the time. I used to be one of these kids. I'd see an ant, I'd squash it. I don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it like. Go ahead.
I was just also curious about have you been on the East Coast recently or any time in like the past couple of years? And is there any activity difference between the West Coast and the East Coast if you have been on the East Coast?
I would love to go back east. The last time I was back there was when I was in Chicago, and I would go back there periodically to visit my dad after my parents were divorced. We lived downtown in McClure Court, which is like there's a scene in the Blues Brothers where they drop the car in front of front of the Chicago skyline. Those two big brown towers I lived in. But no, I haven't been back east. I would love to go back there because there's a lot of people who have had some success using the technique. Now, I tell people to go to a body of water and at twilight start signaling towards the horizon because, the horizon also kind of figures into that quantum theory, that theory of a construct that you were kind of referring to, how things shift around. Mm-hmm. A lot of people, the flat earthers or what have you, they have science too, and they make interesting points. If you look into Admiral Byrd, who, did an expedition down to the North Pole, one of those quests was, to travel out and to find the furthest point, and they didn't do it. He came back pretty battered and shaken with 4,000 people all screwed up and, tanks destroyed and locations destroyed. And, actual people had taken footage of them being attacked by discs that came out of the ocean, so.
Amazing. So Drea is our closest host to you. She's in California. You're in Monterey. I'm not sure what the distance is between the two, but I want to give the floor.
But I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to give the floor to you for a little while, Drea. And okay. what do you have for Christo, Drea?
Well, actually, it was I was struck a little bit when you mentioned about how they would move inward towards the desert because it struck me also while I was watching the documentary. I never really thought that I had a UFO, like any kind of sighting whatsoever. I was like, no, I thought it was, but it probably wasn't until I was about halfway through when you were talking about the ones that your camera couldn't focus on and it would kill the focus. Yeah. And all of a sudden it couldn't show up on your camera anymore. And that actually happened to me and a couple friends relatively recently. I would say about, 6 months to a year ago, out in the high desert out here. And me and my friends were looking at something out in the sky. We're like, oh, take a picture, take a picture. None of our phones it would not show up on our screens at all. And we sounded crazy.
I've become convinced that they can influence the processor and the camera. And if you're using an autofocus, if you don't have everything, absolutely everything set to manual, that's when that starts happening. And it's not a blooming or an exposure thing or a shutter speed thing. It is I can't control the camera at all thing.
Right.
And I've seen it happen on cell phones. I've seen it happen on regular film cameras. Okay.
Oh, wow.
That had a rig on it for the autofocus, I've seen it happen to a bunch of people. Even the rock star, whose name I won't mention, had a 6K camera, with a prime 5,000 millimeter lens. All right. And we looked at the images on their camera, not only the night vision image, but the 6K image. And we're talking about a fucking camera from Snyder's in LA. Okay. This is a camera they had to rent. Right.
Yeah.
And it was identical to what I was getting on my Sony. It was identical. There was no blooming. It was what it was.
Yeah, so I'm literally getting chills right now, just kind of getting that a little bit of confirmation that, because we had a few drinks and we were like, maybe we're not, but we're definitely seeing this, and the fact that we all had cell phones, and that explains. Well,
we've experimented with smoking pot. We've experimented with drinking. We've experimented with eating food, and the one that worked the most, believe it or not, was eating food. When we did it a few times to see if they could sense pleasure, and I tried, like the thing with changing the pictures of them into a frequency of sound that I tried to communicate with them was like a huge failure. I think they understood what I was doing, but because the sounds were just freakishly sine wavy, and they had a lot of FM frequency modulation in them. So, it was almost like you were listening to, ring modulation or something. It was just this like horrible frequency noise from a radio.
They're like, that's what we sound like.
Ew. They're more into folk. They're more into like folk music.
They're like
acoustic music.
They're like, let's try something a little less annoying than the the high pitched noise.
Yeah, hey Christo, let's stick to we don't need your postmodern.
Believe it or not, I actually tried that too.
That probably just pissed them off. They're like, we've seen that.
Yeah, exactly. The one that kind of reacted to sound the most was a jellyfish, and the jellyfish, they punch in from just like nowhere. They'll just show up, and there'll be a couple of orbs, and this jellyfish will show up, and the orbs will take a ride with it, and they move over towards it. The jellyfish kind of like just covers them, and then it splits, and they're all gone.
Can you describe the jellyfish?
The jellyfish are like these ones that look like a multicolored rainbow almost, and they have these little tentacles. You look really closely, they're like these little drifty tentacles that are like the ones that the other orbs have that trail behind them like braids, except these are, they come down and they'll distend a little long, like a jellyfish, like a regular jellyfish does. Mm-hmm. And they're multicolored. That a lot of that activity I had over a lake that turned out, I found out this one lake that I lived over at the cottage by is actually part of the San Andreas Fault. And I'd seen these jellyfish, they would come and they would just kind of real slowly lower themselves down so they weren't noticed too much because they were big. And as they would come down, they would cross in front of the wires. And, when you're watching the night sky is moving left to right pretty much, from the horizon and then, to the other side. So, when you see something moving in a straight line down, but it would always wind up going in this lake. So
interesting. So
I stuck a camera in the lake, but we couldn't find anything in there but bird poop and a lot of silky water.
And some water.
I've tried everything, man. I've tried everything. When it comes to the research, there's nothing that is really out of the question. And the daytime stuff that is in the first movie with the triangle,
it's incredible.
That daytime that's, if anybody can explain that to me, I want to know. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a very good point that you have with the whole aspect of them hiding in plain sight. Makes so much sense because, like you said, they're very intelligent, and even if on the most basic level, if they were to be here visiting, if we are something like an exhibit, the way that if we go to the tide pools, we're like, hey, look at these little creatures that we're not used to. Let's not scare them. Let's blend in.
Yeah.
That just makes so much more sense.
And I use a mirror too in the daytime, so I'm reflecting the sunlight. And it's I did it over by an airport here in Monterey one time, and
did you get in trouble with air traffic control?
No, this thing appeared by the sun, but it was like a cigar shape, and then next to it was a huge white sphere. And a friend of mine who is an arborist, he calls himself a tree surgeon, and he was down the coast, and he was up in these huge trees down in Big Sur, they're like 5 million years old, and he goes up to the top of them and he trims them out for people so they don't get crushed by a 5 million pound branch that comes down and wipes them all out their house, right? So he was up at the top of one of these giant sequoias, and all of a sudden, while I'm signaling and just tripping out on this disc, I get a call from him, and he's like, bro, he goes, look at the sun right now. I go, stop. Are you serious? I go, are you seeing it? He goes, dude, I'm seeing this disc ball thing right by the sun. He goes, it's crazy. He goes, we can plainly see it right now. And I'm like, oh my God, so yeah, he took a picture of that, and that was fun. But some people don't want to fess up their footage either. I can't get a hold of everything that everybody films when I tell them to film it. So, that's
they might be afraid of being called weird.
You'd think after the documentary, if Christo's saying film, just film. All right?
It's like, what are you waiting for?
Exactly.
Trust the man. Trust him.
This dude knows what he's
showing. My core friends, my close friends, they know it's real. They when we started getting to the point where we could actually film in both night vision and with regular film, and it's a big deal for me to make sure that we're not just using night vision, because I want people to see what I'm seeing with my eye, and I want to, and the technology now, it allows you to film in super low light conditions and, nail that thing with focus. I had a guy that came here from Germany to do a sighting with me. He just showed up at my house, right? The guy from Berlin, right? Just shows up at my house, right? And he says, I'm going to take you now. We go have some food.
We'll class work. And
right. And we went down to do a sighting in shit conditions. And he didn't believe it was going to happen, and I made it happen. And he fought himself forever trying to make it bloom. And I'm like, that's the smallest point of focus, bro. And he's, it can't be.
I had a question about when you had some of it that was filmed in ultraviolet, right? In night
vision, yeah.
Okay, that would just be night vision. Were you using that was an actual night vision camera, or was
ultraviolet? My camera ultraviolet. Yeah, no, I have a Sony that shoots. Are you talking about on my website, or are you talking about on the website?
You had a brief part that it was in ultraviolet, I believe.
Oh yeah, that was super brief.
What it is I'm using solar bombardment, which is where you'll use the sunlight to create. I'm using a what is it? It's a filter. It's like it removes one band, one frequency of light. It's an SR7 something. I can't remember what it is, but it's a light isolating filter. And when I use the camera, I'll use the edge of a building and then get the sun to come just down below the edge of that building, and then focus at about 2,000 or 3,000 feet in the air, and just wait for these objects as I signal